right, and welcome to this week's episode of the Melanin Muses podcast, where we will talk about the power of choice and how we have control over more than we think, the power of vulnerability and how it is a superpower that opens doors in our world, and the power of silence in both the professional context as well as in daily use with our guest muse, Patrick. Patrick has experienced more valleys and mountaintops than your average person. Yet, he absolutely refused to allow the valleys to dictate his life. Instead, he turned them into fuel and utilized them to transform himself from a broken man to an Iron Man. He uses his experiences on the regular to give listeners hope and a guiding light to create their own path to their dream lives, to aid in clarifying their own visions, and to provide that spark to help recapture their once lost passions. Now, why would we want to listen to his story? Well, my friends, let me tell you. Patrick's pivotal moment in life came after an accident where he was thrown from his car and woke to three broken vertebrae in his neck, an experience that no one wants to go through. Yet, instead of crumbling, he began a journey to rebuild himself, his body, and his spirit. You could even say that was his hero's journey. And now, he's here to share that journey with us. With that said, no more delay. Let's get started. Welcome, Patrick! Woo!
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, friends. Stoked to be here. Stoked to talk to you today.
Oh, thank you so much. We're so excited to have you here today. Not just to hear about the oh my gosh, that was terrifying moments, but just like the awesomeness, because y'all don't understand. This is my Philly coming out because this is how comfortable we've gotten. Before we went live on this, we just shooting the conversation and be like, hey, what's up? This man's vibe is the best. And just hanging out. You guys are gonna love this story and just who he is as a person, not just the professional side, but just the homeboy. But yes, Patrick, tell us your story, your origin story. Who are you? Like your favorite color, but also who are you growing up?
Thank you so much, Nikki. My favorite color is orange. That's just the best. Orange is the way to go. It represents so many things. It's got good energy to it. Orange and blue, you put blue, those are some super complementary colors and just get you moving. I don't like the Broncos though, even though I love their colors, but we'll just leave it at that. All right. So who am I? Where am I? What's going on in life? You gave us a little bit of an insight. Broken man to Iron Man. I did. I broke my neck in 2010. And as we already talked about, vulnerability, I'll tell you right off the bat, it was a drunk driving accident. That's how I'll put myself out there. I made a mistake that no one should make in their life. And thankfully, I was the only one involved. So I'm really the only one to kind of make peace with it. Thankfully, that no one else was involved, nothing else happened. It's kind of just been my own albatross to wear and to eventually heal. I basically back in 2010, I drove drunk. I got in a car, and there's about 4 hours of my life that just doesn't exist. I got thrown out of my car. It flipped 4 or 5 times. The next guy driving down the road at 2 o'clock in the morning rolled over my tire first, stopped his Jeep, saw me laying in the middle of a highway face down, and called, paramedics, the cops. They medevaced me, and I woke up as I was going down into surgery. And when you're in this state of mind, you don't know what's going on. You're just trying to grasp at things. And they send me down there, and the doctor's like, we're bringing you into surgery. Is there anything you need before we take care of you? And you know what I said? I go, I just got to go to the bathroom real quick. Like, you don't understand how this works right now. Okay. We're not there. Like, you gotta wait a little bit. We'll see on the other side. And they put me under. They took me in surgery, which was nothing to do with my neck. The strangest part of this whole thing was that was just on my arm. I severed a lot of tendons in my bicep. My neck itself, I had no surgery. I had no halo. I had no nothing other than a brace from my waist to my neck for about 4 months. And they just said, go sit on the couch and heal. And they kicked me out of the Hospital in about 3 days, not even 2 or 3 days. Insurance said, you can walk. There's nothing else that can be done here. We're not going to pay for you to stay in the hospital anymore. And they gave the broken me to my mom and said, good luck. Go home and take care of him. And
Like,
then, it's, 10 years as we go from there. But yeah, the story, that's where it started. Yeah.
I'm still processing this entire story. Oh my gosh. Like, that's just not even short of, that is a miracle, especially with the car flipping so many times and people actually, the person that stopped rather than keep going and potentially could have hit you and damaged you even more. Like, that's just, you had some type of guardian angel or something looking out for you there. Like,
Listen, that's the tip of the iceberg. The synchronicities and the weird stuff that happened around that. So my mom had a job of 30 plus years. She got laid off 3 weeks before this happened. She was home with me every single day, took care of me, drove me to physical therapy 3 days a week, like was there. Just got laid off of a job, expansion of the company, whatever, worked for this company for 30 plus years. 2 weeks before, bam, I also thought that I had an accident in a specific place because my bumper stayed on the road for like 3 months and we drove past it every time we went to physical therapy. So I was like, oh, that's where the accident happened. And the wheel that fell off 2 weeks before that, I was like, there's something weird about this wheel. And I don't remember anything that happened. So I don't know what was the cause or the effect. And then 2 years later, this is where the story kind of changed. And we'll go more into this, but I didn't find out for 2 years later that the accident happened 2 miles down the road because I got the discovery from the police officers, the crime scene photos, and all this stuff. It actually happened 2 miles down the road, and I hit a giant rock that separates and divides the two highways. That since I was 10 years old, every summer would be respray painted "Jesus Saves."
what?
I'm not like 100% serious. Like it's still, I've gone back to the site. I've taken pictures with it. It's still on Google Maps. If you go into Google Maps in satellite view and zoom in on this rock, like straight up, it's wild. And about a year before this, my one of my best friends drove across the country, started a new life, was killed in broad daylight, sitting at a red light, doing absolutely nothing wrong. And then, I've been spared, and I have been lucky. And all the cops, all the police, the doctors are like, I've never seen this. I don't know. So I've spent a decade trying to ask why, and then at one point, what's the point of knowing why? I'm here and I'm lucky, and I get to use this life a second time.
Well, one, my condolences to your friend. Like, thank you for sharing that. And that's those, it's like life has a way of preparing you for the craziness, like I've had situations similar, like no way in similar to like the giant accident or anything, but where things happen and at the time I'm like, yo, wait, this just came out of nowhere. But when I reflect on it, I'm like, oh, so if that never happened, I would have never got the opportunity to do this, and this. So I'm thankful for that. And this seems like one of those things, especially when you said, hey, mom got laid off, but now she actually has the time to help you heal and recover from that. And then all this stuff, but like 2 miles prior, so that you kind of flew in this. Okay, guys, yeah, I'm sorry. I am more talkative and able to make more coherent sentences and questions, but I'm still processing. Like, okay, here's a question. How did that feel when you went back and you looked at like the crime scene photos and the reports? Like how was that for you, like emotionally and mentally? I can't imagine like going through that, kind of being out of it during it, but now being fully cognizant and able to look back on it. How was that for you?
It was very challenging, and exactly what you said, something that was needed. I got these photos and everything because right after the accident, my court case, because I was drinking and they did whatever, and my lawyer got it adjourned. And I told him, don't do that. I'm sitting on a couch. Just take my license now. Who cares? Well, it got adjourned, and I never heard anything ever. And 2 years later, I started a new life, moved to a new area, was going, and literally showed up in my mailbox, come back to court. So 2 years after the fact, now is the first time that I found out that this didn't happen in the area I found out. So going and looking through that, And it just, I don't really know how to explain understanding that it was in a different place and it changed all the context around it. And
Mm.
because I don't have a memory of it happening, I had built this like, oh, well, it happened in this area, so this must have been what happened. And I like built a story to fill in that couple of hours. And now it didn't exist because it actually didn't happen there. So the kind of logical process of how the accident would have happened didn't make sense to me now. And instead, I like went up this giant rock and saw my car on its roof and saw, you know, it's weird when you've already punished yourself so much and then you're seeing these like crime scene photos. It just, it took me a long time to find any kind of healing or closure to it. It just kind of shook what I thought I knew and kind of almost restarted the healing process of what you thought you knew doesn't exist. So now you have a whole new thing to learn and to try to make peace with that now.
And what was that like? Like, what steps did you have to take to basically start from scratch? Like, when you suddenly see the truth, which is, like you said, the opposite of what you initially thought to help you heal, now it's like, oh, snap, this is what really happened. I can only imagine how traumatic of a shock that must have been. But then what steps did you take to help recalibrate yourself in the way to start that healing process again?
I don't want to oversimplify it, but if I could put it as point blank as possible, look at it. I There's so many things that happen in life that we turn a blind eye to. We want to pretend they didn't happen. We want to shove it under the rug. We want to like make a different story or make myself out to be a victim of this on how this happened to me. And at the most honest place that I can come to with the event itself is to actually look at it. I did this to myself. I put myself in this situation. I drove this car. I got myself in this accident. I have no one else to blame, no one else to look at, no one else to really take the fall for this, so to speak. And that's the mindset I have now. Obviously, in that moment, it was, yeah, whose fault was this? Is it the alcoholic background? Is it the family? Is it my relationship with my father? Is it, XYZ? This is what caused me to go down this road, and it's their fault that I was drinking, and it's their fault I went down. And I feel like that's what we typically can fall into, and it's easier to kind of draw correlations but at the end of the day, I did it. Like, it's not easy. It's not going to make that less painful, but the simplest fact is to just look at it, like acknowledge it happened, admit it happened, take accountability that it happens. And then once that happens, then you can take steps to heal it, to change the story, to move on from it.
So like the keys were ownership and exposing, like exposure therapy. So not avoiding everything and just suppressing it and letting it go by the wayside, but facing that trauma, facing that experience, like facing the things that you had a clear responsibility for and taking ownership of that. Like, you know what, I made a mistake. How can I learn going forward and not doing the same thing again? Which is fabulous because not many people have the strength and courage to do that, because it can be very shameful, very embarrassing to look back on incidents where you're like, that could have been avoided if only I would have done something differently. But you know what? Now I know better and let me change this behavior. Like you mentioned briefly on like the alcoholism. Would you be open to talking more about that?
Yeah, I am an open book, and that's part of the vulnerability and the power that I feel exists within that. There are no secrets to that. I have struggled with alcohol throughout my life. I went down this road where I used it a lot. And whether it be alcohol, whether it be some other vice, my personal belief is we're trying to fill a hole, or we're trying to have that be a solution to something, or wherever it goes with that. And growing up at that time, I was kind of on the heels of my parents going through a divorce. My family itself wasn't ever really a great, emotionally stable family. There's a lot of pain and a lot of unhealed traumas throughout my family. And I took on a lot of that as I was growing up, and alcohol filled its place of kind of similar to we talked about before we got on here of having a big personality, right? And having a fun personality. It almost scapegoats, or it almost gives like, oh, well, it was because I had the alcohol, that's why I was outgoing, or that's why I had a good personality, rather than maybe it just accentuates the personality that you already have and you're afraid to act like that without having some sort of scapegoat or some sort of reasoning behind it. So I found myself kind of as an extroverted introvert, kind of this weird crossroads where I like a lot of my own time, but I really like socialization. And alcohol in my early 20s led it to be a way for me to be in a social environment. And without having that checked, or without having, a prior plan or prior understanding of why am I going into this drinking scenario? Is it to cover pain? Is it to celebrate? Is it for a good reason? Is it for a bad reason? Is it to numb things? Is it because I actually had a successful good day and I just want to have a drink at the end of it? Like, just because you do something doesn't mean that we all have the same reasoning for doing that. So my alcoholism was really, a gateway to socialization, a gateway to putting myself outside my comfort zone. And unchecked, it took me down some pretty bad roads.
Mm. Well, yeah, again, thank you for sharing that. I feel like there's a lot of people who can resonate with that, especially within their 20s, those who are going into the college sector. I feel like society tends to put this expectation. Ha, I got it. I can speak, guys. It puts this expectation on us when, like, oh, when you go to college, it's like the party thing. You have to drink. You have to, the only way you can connect with people, it's like expected to party and experience all these things while you're in college. And if you don't do that, it's like you're ostracized, or like, well, you're not fun if you don't do this. So in the case that you're talking about, the concept of masking as well, of, hey, I'm going through a lot of this pain and I'm also lonely because of all this pain and all these isolating moments. How can I push past that and connect with other people? Oh, I'm going into this space that requires, oh, I have to drink to be cool. Then I'll drink, make myself extroverted. And then that way I have that safety net of, if someone rejects me, I can blame it on the alcohol and be like, oh, that's not my real personality. I was just drinking at the time. It's become that safety net, but also that sense of false healing, that protective blanket to keep you from really feeling that pain and sitting in it and actually processing it. And you see that so often, because I didn't drink in college either, because medical issues, I couldn't drink, I couldn't smoke. So I experienced that isolating situation of everyone else didn't want to spend time because, oh, you're not drinking, so we don't want you around. So I can understand and empathize with the opposite side of, oh, maybe I'm just, is there something wrong with me because I'm not fitting into that norm? And people don't really understand how detrimental that can be to you. Like, you don't need alcohol. If you want to enjoy it here and there, like, that's perfectly fine. But at the end of the day, the right people who will care for you and push you to be the best that you can be, they will love you without that excess, the tool. I'm trying to be motivational here, guys, but the caffeine's wearing off. But you know what I mean, Patrick.
I do. You don't have to try to be anything. You're being you, and it's awesome. And it's everything you brought up. It's like a safety net, but it's kind of a blessing and a curse. It's like a safety net of, it protects you from the bad, but it also protects you from the good. Like, you don't actually
Yes.
get to fully expand on either side of that, and it just kind of keeps you in the middle, and you don't really go anywhere. And one thing on that, I'll drop things as I go. So one of my personal like isms, a padism, if you will, is around expectations, and something that I regularly say to myself and try to keep myself grounded is, expectations are the birthplace of disappointment. And if you have an expectation, you can be disappointed. But if you don't have an expectation, there's not really a way to be disappointed, because you weren't expecting something to fulfill a prophecy that you thought would happen.
love that. Oh my God, Pat-isms, guys. That we need to trademark that so no one else can take it. The Pat-ism of the day. Like expectation reads. What was the end part?
Expectations are the birthplace of disappointment.
There we go. That's why it's a Pat-ism and not a Nikkiism, because apparently I can't remember the full sentence. I love that though. Like expectations, we constantly tend to have them in all assets of life, whether it's for potential romantic partners or family or professional things. Everyone keeps saying have this expectation, and great. It's wonderful to have boundaries of things that you would like to have in those situations. But at the end of the day, we can't control other people. We can't control situations as much as we would like to. Things just tend to happen, and you can either react or like you can like adjust and like, you know what, this happened. What can I do now? Instead of just being like, why me? We actually had another episode that will discuss the concept of instead of why me, what now? And that's a very important point to make. See that Pat-ism. I'm gonna write that down and just have that on my wall. Like
Please, please.
and
And any
like
of those expectations, they actually influence your actions. So you're trying to actually make the expectation happen. So your actions are actually changing who you're being, and you're actually being slightly less genuine and slightly less, you're coloring your own actions to try to navigate towards what you expect that to ending to be. So it actually like changes what you're actually being in the world.
and you can't be genuine, and therefore you can't make genuine connections because you're not being yourself.
Everything's just so contrived and so like, try to fill this role or this, put it, it just has this, even if it's 1%, it's just this little layer of you're kind of doing this in order to get this.
Mm. Like you have to put on this fake persona, be like, okay, if I'm going to enter this space, I have to do X, Y, and Z to get them to like me. And if I don't do that, then and your brain goes on like overload of how can I make these people like me? And I get it. In certain situations, you're like, well, I can't necessarily go to a business meeting in like PJs and just be like, yo, what's up, homie? Like that's just not gonna work. But it as long as you're doing it in a way you construct it as like, hey, this is who I am. I am still professional. I am still respectful to you. But if we don't vibe, then you're not meant to be in my life. If we do vibe, great. Hello, it's a party here. We have cookies and we have healthy food too, but we love cookies over here. So wait, what kind of cookies do you like? Since we're on that.
The sweet tooth in me will always take any cookie, but anything peanut butter flavored always will always be number one on the list.
Oh, okay, we can't be friends now because you're gonna
Oh
kill me.
man, I broke it. I had such a good streak going. Now it's all over.
Because I have a peanut allergy, but you know that means more cookies for you. So I'll just give them all to you.
All right, so what's your favorite cookie, so that every time I get them, we can just have this like cookie exchange.
Yes. Okay, snickerdoodle, sugar, or chocolate chip. One of those three, and I'm like the happiest camper. Just give me coffee and a cookie, and you're my best friend.
Good to know. Deal. Easiest way ever.
Yes. Oh my god. So on that note, guys, we totally went on the side tangent. But it's for a purpose, and this is why we say just be genuine to yourselves, and the right people around you it'll just feel natural. You shouldn't have to force these relationships with people. You shouldn't have to try and like jump at people like be my friend or be my coworker or be my partner. It shouldn't have to be that difficult. As long as you're being authentic, you're being true, you're not afraid to not know, be open to asking questions, and also getting personal like this, like get to know people beneath the surface, because that's something that I feel is another thing that society doesn't really teach us how to do anymore, especially because we have technology and phones. It's like, how do I actually talk to another human being and get to know them face to face? Well, in this case, Zoom, but it's still face to face in a way.
Still see your
Um,
face.
ah, so guys, like this is it's similar to what we were talking about, but yeah, just be yourself. Don't allow. I know it's easier said than done, trust me, but don't allow these external influences to dictate who you should be.
This happened just literally yesterday, and you sometimes hear this, but you don't really. And you think about compliments and people give you a compliment and some of them feel better or not. And yesterday I got a compliment and I don't know if there's actually a better compliment in the world. So I'll leave this up to discussion, but it was thank you for being you. Like, is there a better, like, not a trait, not a person, like, thank you for like just being your essence. Like how, like, just be you and you'll attract. That's it.
I
It's
love
simple. It's
that
not
so
easy, but it's really
much.
simple.
Yeah, it's because that I really think that's the number one compliment. I agree with you on that because many times we're taught, don't be you. You're too much. You're too little. I got that all the time. You're too much. You need to calm down. And then when you calm
Yeah.
down, oh, you're too little. What's going on? And it's people constantly trying to get you to adjust for their own comfortability level.
Yeah.
And when someone finally, even a stranger that you don't even know that was like, you know what, thank you for being you. You're like refreshing. That can mean so much to people. And of course, we're so stuck on the visuals, like, oh my God, you're pretty. Oh my God, you're so handsome, and all this other stuff. But when you give a more genuine and authentic and personable compliment, like you were incredibly intelligent the way that you were discussing this, or I love the way you light up when you're talking about this, and da da da. You guys don't like that can make someone's day. So this is your challenge as we come near the end of part one. Give someone an authentic compliment today. Like not just a surface, like I like your shoes. Be like, give them a compliment and maybe say why. It's like, yo, I love that outfit because that reminds me of this, or it's just fabulous and it's making my day right now. Just give someone a compliment. That's a challenge for you guys who's listening. All y'all got to do this today, or maybe tomorrow, or whenever you're listening to this.
Now.
All right, guys. So we went from cookies, totally off tangent, and then another like 20-minute off camera type of conversation of tangents, but we're back. And
We back.
this is what happens when you bring up cookies and then you have too much caffeine and you have good vibes. It's great. But we're going to jump into what it was like for your recovery, because after such an immense situation, intense situation, like I, especially after being released after only 3 days and stuff like that, what was that recovery process for you, not only physically but mentally? What was it like for you?
The physical part was much faster than the mental part. The
Mm.
people don't really think so, or they don't believe it. I grew up, I always said I'm Wolverine because my body would heal quicker than anyone I ever knew. I always would be healed like the next day. And my doctors after this, my spine doctor, he's like, I have never seen this happen, and I've never seen someone heal this fast from it. I was taken out of my brace a month earlier than he thought I would. He was like, all right, cool, you're superhuman healer. I don't know how to explain it. And honestly, I was back to normal life, quote unquote normal life in about 4 or 5 months. The, first couple months, it was sitting on the couch, all like moving from a couch to a bed for 3 months straight. It was like lay in bed for 8 hours and now sit on a couch for the other 20 hours or whatever and go back and forth. And that was pretty much it. I only had 2 feet and one arm. I mean, my hand was in a sling and I basically just sat there because of the brace. I couldn't eat anything solid really. So it was have smoothies for 3 months and sit there. And that was pretty much the recovery starting. And then I started physical therapy on my arm while I was still in the brace. And it was the fact of even being able to lift its own weight, trying to get to that point and then lifting a glass or maybe a gallon of milk over a couple of months. And by 6 months, that was pretty much normal. It really was probably 2 years before like I really felt like me completely. I had some nerve damage, so my hand, it would feel like I was wearing a glove. I could feel the pressure, but you couldn't feel the sensitivity of actually like the touch of it for like 2 years until that regenerated. But outside of that, it was oddly fairly quick, like 5 months, like back to work, back to whatever, another insurance kind of thing where unemployment ran out after 4 months and disability ran out after 4 months. And they said, well, you got all these bills. So I literally went back to work. And, then really was the mental, I don't even know if I could fully honestly say that it's complete now 12 years later. I think it's probably mostly, but the recovery of knowing I did that to myself, knowing that my mom woke up to a phone call, to a voicemail saying your son's in a hospital, to making everyone else worry about that. The mental side of that, something in the actual therapy or psychology world is called survivor's guilt, where you actually feel bad that you survived, which is an odd way to feel and an odd way to try to make peace with. Well, overall, that's kind of what it looked like. And then what it turned into is kind of that second half of the Iron Man side of things, which is kind of what led me down this road that you meet me in the fork of right now.
Oh man, like wow. So number one, much respect and much kudos to you for being able to not only survive such a wild incident, but also to process that concept of the survivor's guilt. I can't imagine how conflicting that must be of like, hey, maybe I should be grateful for living, but at the same time, I also put people I care about in the position of worrying so much about me and put them through emotional pain for what happened. But also I put myself through that. Like, I can't imagine that inner conflict that must have happened as a result. Like, do you still find yourself struggling with that today, or have you come to peace with it?
Yeah, I think I've come fairly well to peace, but over the course of the past 12 years, it's looked very different. Do I tell people I drove drunk the first time I meet them? Is it 6 months before they know? I've told people in job interviews. I've told people after they know me for a year and they're like, I had no idea that happened. And it just, it really has everything to do with my relationship with it. And I've gotten more comfortable with that feeling, but it's been hard to get past. Someone sees you as a drunk driver, you are not welcome around them. Whatever that looks like, whatever words or whatever you color that with, it's very controversial to tell someone you drove drunk and you survived. And you're one of the lucky ones that didn't die or didn't kill someone else. And everyone has their own opinion on what should have happened. And
Mm-hmm.
none of those things did happen. What did happen happened. And all I can do is take from it, learn from it, and devote my second chance of life to service to other people to help prevent other people from doing this. And if you do find yourself in a situation like this, to be someone to let you know it's not over if you don't choose that road. You can choose for it not to be over.
And I think that's very important for our audience to hear as well, especially if they are along the lines of, oh, every drunk driver is bad, which is not the case. We many of us are very quick to jump to conclusions. I think we're a very jump to conclusion society, especially when it comes to social media and the news put on there, quote unquote. People are quick to believe anything. And we're taught that drunk driving, oh yeah, it's bad, don't do it. And that someone who does it must be a terrible person. But at the end of the day, you don't know what people are going through. Now, this does not excuse the action, but we can at least put some understanding as to what led to that decision. What is that person going through that led them to drink? And what led them to put themselves in that position or get into that position? We have to have some empathy. And especially if someone's choosing to have a different path than the one that was originally walked down upon, then we also have to take that into consideration as well. They're making efforts to change. They acknowledge what they did and like, hey, I'm not proud of it, but I can be different now. And we shouldn't allow, not shouldn't, like, I don't think we should allow people's past actions to put them in this perspective as, oh, well, they're a bad person in total. Um, as long as they're making steps to be better people, judge them on who they are now rather than who they were. Like, you don't have to forget about it. You can keep it in mind, but that can help you recognize, are they making those better choices now for the people around them? So yeah, thank you for sharing about that. Like, that's especially the scrutiny that people can put you under for making a decision in a place of pain, um, and then having to go through that guilt and dealing with the scrutiny of others. It's not easy, especially as a person. As humans, we want to be accepted. We want to be around people who love us and be part of the community. But when you show your truth and then people try to reject you, that can be very painful. So the strength that you have to keep going through that and keep sharing your story, that's absolutely wonderful. And like, thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you. Can't
Of course.
speak if there's no one to listen.
Fair, 100%. And with that, guys, we're going to go on a very quick break, and then we'll be right back after these messages. And we're back after some dancing. Woo! So, guys, we ended the part one of this podcast on a very not solemn note, but on let's give you some positive feedback, a food for thought type of note. But now let's transition into part two, where we get to some more actionable steps in really cool advice from our guest muse. So, Patrick, please tell us more about this concept of the power of choice. And we are in control more than we think. What? Tell us more about that.
Everyone has a choice. And it's just that many times we're looking to make a choice about a different part that can't have the choice. I know that sounds a little bit convoluted, but it's like you can't choose the weather, but you can choose what you wear. Like you can't choose if you're working tomorrow, but you can choose how you're going to go into it and what the mindset is. You can't choose if someone cuts you off in a parking lot, but you can choose how you react to it. It's all those kind of ideas where, you know, for my situation, I could have chose to be a victim, or I could choose to be a victor of my experience and extract wisdom out of that and be able to look at it and extract things from it. I think that really everything relates back to choice, and you get to choose the life you want. You get to choose the person you are. You get to make these choices every day. And many people overlook the fact that they're making choices. They don't even acknowledge or realize that it was a choice to wear blue today or red today and how people interact with that. They don't think about the choice of, did I eat breakfast or not eat breakfast? And how does that energy level affect me throughout the day? Will that make me more frustrated or more irritable? You know, I know there's a lot of things in the world. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of the controversial topics in the world, but there's a lot of things that you can't control, but you can control what your day-to-day life is. You can't control who's setting the laws in America. You can't choose who is making decisions about certain concepts or things of that nature, but you can choose what your day-to-day life looks like. It doesn't matter that something needs to be fixed in society, in the world, but it does matter. Did you go to sleep at the time you wanted to last night? Did you wake up this morning when you said you were going to wake up? Did you go to the gym like you said you were going to go to the gym? Are you eating a healthy diet? Are you getting exercise? Are you making these choices that coincide with a healthy individual mindset and physically? And we have so much more control over what we do, not what's happening to us, but what we do. Like you said, am I reacting to things or am I responding to things? Am I just having a knee-jerk reaction when something happens? Or, okay, that happens, and now I can make a choice on what I want my response to be, instead of just, okay, this happened, so now this is going in. Like, no, you can just choose. I know it sounds like simple and like emotionless, but at the bottom of the barrel, it's just, what do you want? I mean, what do you want out of your life? Do you want to be happy? Do you want to be healthy? So then do that. Like, there's so much available in the world today with the internet, with connecting, with networking. The fact Zoom, we're talking right now 1,500 miles apart from each other. Like, you can have access to so many things in the world, and you just have to decide. You have to even make a choice on what you want your choice to be. Like, who do you want to be? And then that starts to create this kind of trickle down domino effect of, well, if I want to be this person, well, then I'm going to make this choice to support that. And then maybe it doesn't happen today, maybe it doesn't happen tomorrow, but a month from now, a year from now, 12 years from now, you're not the same person. You've made choices to live a different life, to live a different path, and to ultimately choose a different reality that makes you more fulfilled.
It sounds easy, but it's not easy, because trust and believe, I know. Like, when you sit and reflect on who you were, like even when I sit and reflect who I was like just 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I'm like, dang, I wouldn't have been my friend. Kudos to my friends who stuck around. Shout out, love you, Tara. 14 years. You stuck it out. But it's it's one of those things where you don't have to change overnight. And he brilliantly kind of broke it down. It's all about the little choices. Like before you try to make these huge choices in society that try to change the world, how can you change yourself to be a better person? Like, for example, he mentioned the concept of exercise and being living a healthier life. Okay, you don't got to do a complete 180. So what's one thing you could do? Okay, I can get a bottle of water, put it by my bedside, so that way when I first wake up in the morning, I know drink some water when I first get up, and that could be your first baby step. You don't have to make dramatic changes because otherwise a lot of people end up falling off. That's why the New Year's resolutions concept tends to fail so epically, because people try to do these dramatic changes so quickly. Like, it's the new year, new me. But instead of maybe not like that, but
It's
or
true.
maybe. And so just take those small little habits and work on those first, and then over time they can compound and build upon each other, so then that way you can actually start becoming that person you want to be, and then you can start making those changes that you want to see in society. Because if you don't see someone, if we went political in office that you want to be representing people, why don't you become that person, become that change? But you first have to start inside in your own life instead of trying to dictate to others, well, you should be doing this. What about you? Can you, like, are you perfect? Are you living the life that you want? Then don't say nothing. Like, that's something that we also got to take into consideration. Don't judge others unless your life is perfectly squeaky clean and people can't point fingers at you, because everyone's going through something. Just choose to be that better person no matter what your past is, because you can always make a difference.
I mean, everything's a
Yes.
network. You can't change the giant thing. To change your health, for an example, it's not one thing. It's like 10 different things.
Mhm.
It's did you drink enough water, the right nutrition, enough sleep? Did you there? You can't just change one big thing.
Mhm.
You have to change the network that supports that. It's not just if you want a better relationship with someone, or like, I was having this conversation with my mom last week, around holiday times, where it's like, I wanted to be invited to XYZ, or I wanted to be a part of something. But it's like, well, maybe there's extenuating circumstances that makes it odd for both parties. And maybe it's
Mhm.
that situation, and being invited to events will be a byproduct of actually just improving the relationship. Like, you can't just cherry pick, I want to be this healthy, or I want to be involved in this. You have to actually change the bedrock that supports all of that to improve the atmosphere and relationship that surrounds that, so that
Mhm.
those interactions and those experiences are just byproducts. Because you're doing these things, now you have more of these opportunities that are more involved with this choice that you're trying to make.
And that's a perfect segue into the next point that we were going to talk about, of the power of vulnerability. Like that concept of having to have that conversation of, hey, things might not be comfortable for other people, in expressing that in communication. Like, can you talk more upon the concept of the power of vulnerability? There we go.
Yeah, this is a chestnut for sure to crack open. And this is, what is vulnerability, right? It's like, oh, what do you define that as? What do people see? Oh, you're being vulnerable. Oh, I don't want to be vulnerable because then I can be attacked. Or vulnerable isn't strong because you're leaving your defenses down. And okay, well, why do you need to be defensive? Like, why do you need to protect yourself? Just like we talked about with the net earlier, you're protecting yourself from those bad attacks. You're also protecting yourself from ever having true, genuine, deep human connection because you were vulnerable. So you're still sitting in this middle, and you can't have the great without having the bad. You can't cherry pick, I only want to have good experiences. I only want to have positive, really safe interactions with everyone. You can't find that safe interaction without the risk of finding the risky interaction. And vulnerability is the key that opens the door to say, I'm willing to try it all. And then by sampling these, now I can pick the good to stay more in my life. This vulnerability is like I one of the first things I said when we started this, right, was I drove drunk. Bam. Cool. Now I automatically open up the possibility that people hate me.
Mhm.
But you know what? The more times I've said that over the past 10 years, more people have had a positive response to that than a negative. And it's completely surprised me. And this
Mhm.
vulnerability is also, it opens the door and extends and invites others to be vulnerable. I ask for vulnerability when I go out, when I speak, when I share my story, and I ask for people to be vulnerable, and I'm vulnerable first. Because if I'm vulnerable, you lead by action, and words only do so much. But when you can act the way that you're telling other or inviting others to act, when you're actually acting in that manner, it resonates on such a higher self-conscious or subconscious level where people are way more receptive to that. If you're vulnerable to whatever happens, you just end up attracting different and more unique and better experiences in life. And I just, that's my dream of where the world goes, where we are all more vulnerable, we all connect more. And when you're vulnerable, so many people have a preconceived notion about you. Like, you have no idea, anyone that's watching this, who I am, but I'm a white male in my 30s. So automatically you've contrived this story arc of what my background may or may not be, what's positive in my life, what my financial background is, what any background is. And when you tell someone I made a mistake, they're like, oh shit, I'm not, oh, I've made mistakes. Wait, you're not perfect? Holy crap, I'm not perfect. No way. There's other people that aren't perfect. Holy crap. And then you can even see just in that interaction the way your persona receives that, the way another human being can pick that up and be like, wow, instant. That breaks down way more barriers than any kind of follow my 3 steps to this, or I'll show you the way, or like, stand there and have a heart to heart. Be willing to be the person that gets hurt. And yes, you'll get hurt, but you'll also get loved.
Yes, and you'll also get stronger too, and you'll become wiser about what, like, choosing what vulnerability you allow people to see. This doesn't mean, for y'all listening, this doesn't mean tell your whole story and trauma dump on people. Don't do that. We don't mean that. Don't trauma dump on people. That's not good. Like, there's certain things that people should have the permission to hear about you or experience with you once you get to know them. Not everyone deserves your most inner darkest secrets, but you can allow yourself to be vulnerable to an extent to give other people permission to be like, hey, I'm a safe space. And if you need that safe space, I am here, and I want to give you permission to be yourself. We don't got to be best buddies, but I can still respect you as another human being and see you and allow you to have your voice be heard, because not all the time do we have the ability to feel like we're heard or feel like we're seen. So that vulnerability is definitely very important, because if you keep living a closed off life, you're going to attract, like Patrick was saying earlier, a very closed off community. And I know that from experience. I used to suppress a lot and be numb to things, to numb to emotions because of past experiences. And that took years to undo. And now being in a spot where I can actually feel that love and feel that connection with people, it's just so nice and warm and fuzzy, and I love it. So come join the light side, because it's nice over here. And then from that, so we have that power of choice, and then we have that power of vulnerability, and that choice to be vulnerable. See what I did there? Let's go into the power of silence now, which seems to be the direct opposite, but is not. Let's touch upon that.
So first, I just want to say thank you for sharing a little bit of your side of that vulnerability, because you see it in action. By being vulnerable, you just were vulnerable back to me. And I appreciate that. And I want to acknowledge that, because that is it happening, what we're talking about in the moment. And when it comes to, and then you drew the connection that a lot of people don't make yourself, of you're actually making the choice to be vulnerable. It's not just like it happens. You're going into that with that. And then when it comes to silence, in the professional side of things, when I give talks and when I am invited and I share, I take a lot of long, open pauses. And at first, it might be a little uncomfortable, but the number one feedback I've ever gotten is, wow, I didn't realize how powerful silence can be. And when we take that into our daily lives, there's so much overstimulation with social media, with apps, with the next video, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And I've just tried to incorporate this into my daily life. And what I call it is pausing. You know, it doesn't have to be a meditation. It doesn't have to be like named or something, or just pausing, like stopping and actually stopping, not stopping and scrolling in your phone and I'm taking a rest, but actually not touching anything, sitting. And literally, if you can sit for 1 minute, is will do so much more than you ever think, because we're just driving all day, every day, all the time. Just being able to stop, you can have these thoughts, you can have these reflections, you allow space to be filled with it.
Oh, yo, I feel like I'm being called out right now. No, not really. But yeah, I was just a little bit, because the the concept of silence, especially when you're in conversation with another person, and this is how I uh can gauge on how close and comfortable I feel with another person, is if we can sit in silence and not speak and not feel that pressure to speak to each other and just even do our own thing but be in the same space. I like you and we cool. Like, you can do this, I can do that. We be like, hey, you good? You good? Okay, I'm good. Okay, cool. Go back to being quiet. Leave me alone. That's then we comfortable. But then when you're around another person, we're just like, they stop talking. Oh my gosh. Okay, what do I say next? Then it's a way to kind of gauge your own insecurities as well. It's like, why do you feel the need to talk? Why do you feel the need to justify things? Why do you feel the need to explain? Just take that moment and just let things settle. Like, it's hard, but once you learn how to do it, it can be so powerful. And like, you briefly touched upon the way you utilize it in when you're speaking engagements. How can other people utilize it in other professional segments?
I think space, it creates space. The silence creates space to make others feel like their thoughts are welcome and they can contribute, and it can start an actual conversation that you're not being dictated to, or you're doing the dictating. It creates, in any professional environment, it increases the communication and it creates more rapport between, whether it's two coworkers, whether it's a boss, whether it's anything. It creates you guys being on the same level. It's not one person controlling and I'm talking and you listen. It's a conversation. And when you leave the space open, A, it makes the other person feel involved. And B, you have no idea what new perspective can just find its way into that space because you gave it room.
Oh, 100%. That's how we got into so many tangents, because we had those silent pauses like, oh, wait, about this? It works. It's working in action right now. And like, that's just like the perfect segue to the end of this episode. Like, there's so much more we could talk about, but otherwise we'd be talking for a few hours, and we're not going to do that to you guys. Well, but be sure we're going to bring him back. You're going to come back. You can't get rid of us that easily, Patrick.
Yes, round two.
So, and on that note, like, are there any final thoughts as we bring this episode to a close? Any final thoughts, tips, tricks, advice to our listeners? And where can they stalk you? Just like your AI tried to do earlier. How can people find you?
So, Patrick Linfante, if you Google it, if you Facebook, LinkedIn, I have my own website, patricklinfante.com. If you're on any of the socials, The Patrick Perspective, it's the way I see the world. It's kind of my handle, my brand. And my tip, my advice, my anything is just start. Just do one little thing today. I'm not asking you to revolutionize your personality in one day or change your whole lifestyle in a day, but do one single thing today. Make one choice to be vulnerable one time and just see what happens.
I love that so much. All right, guys, like, thank you again so much, Patrick, for joining us on the Melanin Muses podcast. This was so much fun to have you on our show. And don't worry, for y'all listening and for y'all watching on YouTube, go watch it on YouTube too to see our just amazing faces, because we're adorable and it'll just make the experience even better. But in the show notes and in the YouTube description, I will have all the links so you can follow Patrick on the social medias and check out his website, all that fancy stuff. But again, thank you guys. Thank you, listeners, audience, Muses, all y'all, we love you. Thank you for joining us today for today's episode of the Melanin Muses podcast with Patrick. To hear more, please subscribe and follow to our podcast wherever you listen to us. And we would love, love, love if you gave us a rating and a review so we can ensure that we are bringing you valuable and quality content. And we just love hearing from you because, you know, communication and vulnerability. Let us hear your thoughts on this. And we encourage you to share this episode with someone with whom you think will get great value out of it, because you never know. You can share what you're learning with somebody else. And lastly, be sure to check us out over on Instagram at the Melanin Muses Podcast. But at Melanin Muses Podcast, as well as our official YouTube channel, Melanin Muses Podcast, for more quality, fun, shenanigan content. So on that note, we shall see you next week. This is Nikki B signing off, and
Patrick Linfante. Thank you.